Now, this story could easily be chalked up to first night nerves. Me, alone on 5,000 acres of country I'd never seen, starting a job I'd never done before, in a place I'd never been. But know this, reader. I may not know what I saw, but I know what I feel when cold wind blows and ice creeps on frozen glass. I know the old adage that goes, "It ain't the cold that'll kill you, it's when the wind chill gets in that'll do it." And I tell you this, friend, on a cold winter's night where even the moon stays away and the inky black is only broken by the white of that silent frozen earth, it's not just the chill that you need to keep out. I arrived in Anderson, Montana on May 22nd without much but what my Kia SUV could carry and an invitation from a guy named Ed for a ranch hand position for the summer. About 15 miles outside of town, I met Ed, a man tougher than old boot leather and twice as serious at a fishing pull-off of the Yellowstone River. From there, we traced a 9-mile stretch of gravel track from the Highway 89 to the front gates of Jackson Basin Ranch, built into a narrow holler between two rocky hills above a 60-foot gully. It was snowing, not uncommon for this elevation, but a total surprise to me, a kid from Virginia where winter decided it had enough the moment March hit. It was light but steady, and as we trundled along between the huge pasture and acres of sagebrush, the gravel road below our tires got harder and harder to see. Eventually, I was just filling in Ed's Chevy tire tracks as we meandered through the thickening silent white. After a time, we pulled into the small gravel drive for Atz's cabin, so named for the man the ranch was bought from, whose daddy and daddy's daddy had been in Montana since before Montana was Montana. After settling my things and giving me the tour of the whopping 3-room building, Ed turned to me with one final instruction. You see, every window in the cabin was missing something. Curtains or blinds of any kind. Now it gets right dark that far away from civilization, and I didn't reckon I'd be in the cabin much during the day where it would be a problem. But nonetheless, Ed gestured to the small cord-powered candles that were in each window, the kind of thing you'd see in a housewife's New England home around Christmas. Now while there's snow on the ground, son, make sure these stay lit in the windows at night, you hear? Ed told me, in a voice like gravel under off-road tires. Why's that? I asked. Ed, not used to being someone who has to explain himself, particularly to an outsider, hesitated. Despite his seriousness about the job, he had still had a twinkle in his eye, like underneath that tough iron and leather exterior, he was a good-natured man when we had first met that morning. The twinkle was gone in that moment. A moment later, he blinked. Mountain lions, he said shortly. Keeps them away. And with a look like the muzzle of a freshly fired 12-gauge prompted me to accept that's all he wanted to share about that. I took him at his word. Seemed like a reasonable worry out here, and we'd finished getting me settled in. Ed took his leave from there, and he left me alone to the cold and the quiet. Now, it was getting to late afternoon already, and I had brought some food up with me from town, so there was no reason for me to leave, so I set to relaxing. The cabin was quaint, no bigger or smaller than I needed, with a kitchen, living room, upstairs loft where all the beds were, and a small bathroom. An upper and lower porch gave views clear across the southern part of the ranch, not that there was all that to see. The snow was coming down harder now, and though the next week promised warmer weather to wipe it up quick, it still left a blanket on the trees and fields around me. About an hour passed before the sun dipped below the Bridger Mountains to the west, and suddenly the small holler the cabin was fixed in got very dark very quickly. The overcast sky kept none of the sun's last whispers alive, so when it was gone there was nothing left but the silent pattings of falling snow and the inky black of a sky I couldn't see. I set to switching the candles on like Ed had said, and one by one the windows of the cabin cast dull orange light on the snow directly outside. It was full dark out now, the kind of dark that you get lost in if you stare too long. Flipping one of the candles in the kitchen on, I noticed in the pressed snow outside a depression, a break in the otherwise placid white. Looking closer through the dim light, it looked like a footprint. No print from a cat or heavy leather sole. No, this was a bare footprint. Just one of them, just inside where the silent white and dull orange met. Suddenly it was very cold. I turned around quickly, thinking it was just some foolishness in my head, and I headed up to the stairs to light the candles in the bedroom. First I turned on the ones by the porch at the top of the stairs, then I turned to my bed and the windows there. In the blackness of the winter's night, by the window above where my head was to lay that very night, was a shape. I could have never made it out but for two pinpricks vaguely lighting its silhouette like fireflies, burning a small, dull red against the voided black of the snowy night. Quick as that, the pinprick stayed for a moment before flashing away, so quick I'd wondered if I'd actually seen it. Carried by running feet I hadn't told to go, I grabbed for the candle and clicked it on, the dim light almost emanating its own warmth against the cold that had grabbed my spine. Then there was a knock on the door. Like the frozen night had forgotten this cabin had walls, the very blood in my body froze stiff. A second later, another knock rang through like the sharp bark of a good hound. I crept to the stairs. I crept down to the kitchen. I crept slow and tense to the cabin door. Every few steps, this devil's treble would ring out.
"Who's out there now? Ed?"
I found myself shouting. It was deathly quiet, like the snow outside had gone and froze the world solid. Sight, sound, light, and warmth with it. The knocking stopped. Like my guest felt satisfied in summoning me, waiting to be beckoned in, like something that needed to be. I stood, feet from the door, my heart racing like a critter's, but my breath was stuck so deep in my chest I dared not stir the silence with more of it. Then there I saw it, a tiny detail that may have been my salvation that night. There, barely seen by the dull orange glow of the cabin lights, was the light switch for the porch. I had missed those. Quick as I'd ever been, I stuck my hand out to flip the switch, and the sharp orange of the light flashed under the doorway. The whole frozen world continued to stand still. I took my second breath in twice as many minutes and called out again for my guest. My voice rang in my ears like the noise wasn't welcome in the air around me. Another minute. More silence. Almost not thinking, I reached for the door handle, some blood rushing back in to wash away that frigid fear. The door swung open, on its own in the cold air. The snow had piled a good 4 or 5 inches on the balcony of the porch. But the deck being covered, the snow hadn't managed to pile up on it. With just a dusting of snow like a Christmas cookie laid on those old deck boards, so thin you could almost make out the crystals in the ice. Except the 2 bare footprints right in front of my door. 10 toes in the snow, not 12 inches from where the heavy wood door now swung lazily in the cold air. No steps to, no steps from. It wasn't the cold that had got me now, and I don't think what did it was from the night air either. A chill started creeping down my back, like cold, cold water locking me up and drawing my eyes to the inky dark beyond the dull glow of the porch's light. Individual flakes of falling snow flashed in the light for a moment, then vanished in the dark. Dozens of them, like fireflies or embers from a dying fire. Sometimes pairs of them would flash. Most of them were moving, lazily falling to the ground, but many of them weren't. Arrayed just beyond the dim salvation coming from the simple 60-watt bulb, dozens of pairs of ember-like pinpricks of light punctured the cold, dark air. Every one of them, it seemed, fixed on me. Whenever people come across a bear or a moose or a coyote or some other critter wandering through their town, you always get the ones up in arms about, "What's that doing here? This ain't their home." But I bet you a good bit if you could look into the mind of that animal, you'd see, well, hell, this here's always been my home. Not my fault you moved into it. I reckon that idea just ain't the truth for critters or natives. This is old country. Very old country. With very old things who were here first in it. And when the moon goes dark and the sky sets quiet and a chill grips the earth like old iron, maybe it's time to pay the new neighbor a visit. Hey everyone, I'd just like to give a quick thank you for listening to my video if you made it this far, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'd also like to give a shout out to DaLB53, the writer of this story. It was a great story, and I had an amazing time doing the narration. If you want to read the story yourself, which I highly recommend, I left a link to their Reddit in the description below. I would also like to thank my producer, Coyote. Without his help, I wouldn't be able to produce these half as well as they are. And for any of you that are interested, I will also leave a link to his socials below. Thank you again, and I really hope you enjoyed.